have some experience. Ooh, we have some folks talking about working on stopping ambivalence, hesitation. Beautiful. Well, please let me know if you have any questions during this session. You're welcome to unmute. You're welcome to use the chat function. Erin's going to help me if maybe I don't see all of the questions in chat while I'm going through the slides. But if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. And Erin and I will stay on a little bit longer if there are some questions that maybe you're not comfortable asking in the large group. So we're going to go ahead and just get right into it. So you all have mentioned a lot of these components already about motivational interviewing, but is a client-centered guiding communication style for enhancing a person's own motivation for change. That's why it's called motivational interviewing. We're really trying to figure out someone's motivation for changing, and then the interviewing is a client-centered open style of communication where the client does the majority of the talking. And so that's where the name comes from. And I'm sure you all do this in your work currently. One of my mentors of MI said it's not rocket science and it's deceptively simple. So you may be doing a lot of this work already, just maybe didn't name it motivational interviewing. And so, of course, especially with the COVID work, we're really showing compassion and genuine concern for people's well-being and making sure that they stay safe and healthy the best that we can, accepting, honoring, and supporting the person's personal responsibility for change, whether they choose to or not. Raise your hand if you had some folks who decided not to change, no matter how good your counseling was, no matter how good the information was, no matter how pressing it was. We do honor that acceptance. And then we say that it's a partnership. It's two experts talking. You are probably the expert in COVID-19, nursing, contact tracing, case investigation, and the client or the patient, the contact or the case are an expert in their own lives. And then evoking is really trying to draw out the person's view about the change area. And you can do that even in a short call. If you're a contact tracer and you only have a 15-minute call with someone, you can still evoke their views about the change area. So give me a thumbs up or a hand raise if you've heard of OARS before. Okay, yes, definitely. So this is the micro skills of motivational interviewing. Most of us have heard of OARS, even if we haven't really gotten a lot of training in motivational interviewing. So we're going to go through these one by one, but it is an acronym for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summary. So we're going to go through them one by one. And Tori, I see your hand is still raised. Did you want to say something?
No, sorry about that. I'm trying to take it down now.
Oh, no worries. I would love to hear some voices if folks have questions or like to contribute something. We will talk about these open-ended questions, but I wonder if someone would be willing to unmute and tell me what an open-ended question is. And I promise I never ask tough questions. Normally the answer is in the room somewhere. What is an open-ended question?
Something that doesn't have
Jill, please, I'm sorry, I heard you first.
Something that isn't a question that just is yes or no. So it's something that somebody has to expand upon, and it helps keep the conversation going. So it's not something that's just kind of an interview that you're just asking questions, but that you allow people to open.
Yes, thank you so much, Jill. Yes, open discussion, they give you more detail. Thank you so much for that. I did hear someone else's voice, but I'm sorry I didn't see who else said something. And it may be that Jill already mentioned what you were thinking of saying. So Jill also said it's difficult to answer yes or no. You get a lot more information and that keeps the conversation focused on the client. So with close-ended questions, and there is some utility to close-ended questions, but they can stifle the conversation. They may imply the quote right answer, and it may narrow the choices, but it can also help you with a quick response. So if you have someone who's maybe going in a different direction and you have a limited time for your call, you may ask a close-ended question to redirect what is happening. And also some of those demographics questions you want to ask in a closed way, because I always joke, I would never want to ask, so Katie, tell me about your address. That would give us too much information and probably not what we really want to know. So affirmations, I'm not sure if you all can see this here, but a self-affirmation that this looks very similar to my dog says, I'm fast enough and I'll catch that squirrel tomorrow. So that's a self-affirmation. When we are affirming someone, then we are actually acknowledging their strengths and what is a behavior that can lead towards change, no matter how big or small. It helps build confidence, and they have to be genuine and congruent. When I learned motivational interviewing, the very first training, I appreciated that the trainer said affirmations are like salt. So you sprinkle them in there. If you put in too much salt in a recipe, it makes it inedible. So if we're giving too many affirmations, it may seem like I'm not really genuine. And so you sprinkle them in there. Again, you're focusing on someone's strengths and difficulty they've overcome. An easy affirmation that I used a lot at Denver Health is, our parking is really hard. It's gotten easier through the years because now it's free and we have more parking, but I would often say, thank you for coming in. I know our parking situation is really hard. I appreciate you being here and being on time. So that's an easy affirmation that I typically would be able to share with our patients as they came in. But here are some examples that you might have used or you might use in your COVID-19 work. So for example, if you're a resource coordinator and you're helping someone, an affirmation might be, your response to the loss of your job demonstrates resourcefulness. Or it took a lot of strength not to see your grandkids when you were isolating. I know that was really hard for you. Or you handled yourself with poise in that difficult situation. It took a lot of courage to tell your partner that you have COVID and that you need to isolate, even if it's difficult. So these are some potential examples of affirmations that you could use with your contacts, your cases, your clients. I'm going to pause here and see if there might be any questions about affirmations. You're welcome to unmute. Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any. So the R in the OARS are reflections or reflective listening. An easy way to think of reflections is you're putting up a mirror. So it's really active listening, both to what they've said and the feelings behind them. It really is active listening. We can't be making our grocery store list if we're really reflecting. It really helps folks talk, think, keep the conversation going. And it also helps to make sure that we're understanding what's going on. I'm sure Aaron gets tired of this story, but this is the funniest story for me. When I was trying to reflect a patient in our family planning clinic, and I said, you're really angry that your husband isn't doing what he said he would do. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not angry, I'm pissed. He's not doing what he said he would do. So I really was trying to take a guess at the feeling, the emotion behind what was going on for her. And I got it wrong. I apologized. And the main intent is that it kept the conversation going. So you may have to guess at what the emotion is, and that's okay. Most of the time people will tell you, but they know that you're listening and it keeps the conversation going. So again, you may be trying to guess at those thoughts and feelings, but it keeps the conversation going. It helps people feel accepted without judging them. And so reflecting, for me, of these micro skills is a little bit more difficult than the open-ended questions, the affirmations, and the summaries, because sometimes we are really trying to get at what's going on behind what the person is saying. So a simple reflection is, what did she say? You said you're scared to tell your partner that you have COVID. Let's talk about that. Or a more complex reflection touches behind the feelings on what's going on for that person. So many of you may have had calls that were abrupt. Maybe someone seemed maybe even super angry. They didn't want to listen. Well, there's a lot of emotion behind our COVID work. So really trying to get at what was happening for that person, getting behind the feelings can make them feel heard. And one of the main points of motivational interviewing, as we heard in those introductions, is just listening. Sometimes behind that emotion, someone just feels like they haven't been listened to and they're scared. So just listening is helpful. And then focused, a lot of times we will hear about the importance and confidence. And so someone may say to you, I just can't not go to work. I have to support my family. I don't have enough money to pay the rent if I don't work. So it's really important for that person to make sure that they're having enough money come in. So as a resource coordinator, am I able to help in some way? And then the S is summarizing. And again, it's not just at the very end of your 15-minute call. It's not the last 14 and 15 minutes. It's actually summarizing throughout the interaction. So it helps recall the conversation, think of new ideas, plan next steps, and feel more confident moving forward. Another quote trick to the summarizing of this is when people hear their own words through someone else, it's more impactful. So I've had patients say before, no, that's not what I said. Or, wow, now that you say that, that seems way too ambitious. Do you mind if we back up a little bit and think about this? Or I just can't do that by the next call. So of the OARS, could we just use OARS? They work really well, but just OARS is not motivational interviewing. They are an essential skill, they're good practice, but of course we want to move towards the direction of change. So we're going to talk about some other things that really help with our interactions when we're working with cases or clients or patients. So we'll talk about some of these different ways of helping clients change. So we really try to engage folks. I'm sure you do that already when you're really trying to develop rapport with someone quickly on the phone so that they don't hear that I work with the health department and they hang up because they know what the call might be. We're really trying to engage them, involve them in their care and their plan, really showing empathy. Of course, that's a big component of motivational interviewing, COVID-19 work, and just humanizing the conversation. There is a particular identified target for the change, which oftentimes, because of the scope of work, you do have your target for change. You're really focusing the conversation and then really trying to figure out the motivation or plans for change. In my years of counseling, I'd say that is the silver bullet, trying to figure out someone's motivation and what's really important for them is how we can really evoke that change. And then, as many of you said in those introductions, when they're ready, then we can actually start with the plan. If we start too early, then of course we're going to lose them. So OARS plus other things like engaging, focus, evoking, and planning are ways to really help our clients change. So what about education? COVID-19 is the novel coronavirus, right? It was new for everyone, new for all of us. What do we do when we do have some information? We do have some education. So we give it in a consistent manner. When they ask for it, they ask for information, advice, we give it. And then if we're wanting to share some information and advice about a situation or solutions, we use something called the ELICIT-PROVIDE-ELICIT model. I love this model. I've used it throughout my public health work. I've used it for all kinds of things. I've done a lot of HIV prevention and education, sexually transmitted infection, health promotion, alcohol reduction, birth control, uptake, and with COVID. So as you can see here, I love this. It works really well. It used to be called Ask, Tell, Ask. So we are eliciting the client's thoughts and views and ideas and solutions. So depending on the scope of your work, you may ask, tell me what you know about COVID-19. I do trainings through the Centers for Disease Control for contact tracers and case investigators. That's one of the first things we ask in our quote script. Tell me what you know about COVID-19. We get a lot of good information. We figure out if the information might be correct, or maybe there might be some misinformation. You could also ask something like, what have you heard about isolation? And then the provide is providing information to help with the change, but you typically ask permission first. So yes, do you mind if I share more information about quarantine and what that means? And I will then fill in the gaps. Or you could say something like, yes, that's correct. It can affect the respiratory system. Is it okay if I share more about the health effects? And then the second elicit is really trying to get feedback on what the client thinks about the information, some feelings, thoughts. So we talked a little bit about isolation. How does that make you feel? Would you be able to do that? Or you might say something like, what steps might you take to quarantine to protect your family in this situation? I'm going to pause here and see what questions you have about elicit, provide, elicit. Elicit, provide, elicit. So again, thinking about your COVID-19 work, what questions do you have about how you might use this in your work? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing. Oh yes, please, please.
Sorry, there's little kitty sounds in the back because I work at home with a 2-year-old and
No worries, Amy.
he's
Thank
trying
you.
to be part of the Zoom call. But so something I've been doing recently, because we're doing kind of like historic interviewing project. So we're going kind of backwards and just, seeing people's isolation and stuff like that, and just kind of ask a few questions. One thing I've been asking, and hopefully I'm allowed to do this, but just for my own curious sake, I always at the end of the call, I'll say, so thank you so much, for all the information, blah, blah, blah. And then I usually ask, so, I just out of curiosity, how do you feel that Colorado, handled COVID-19, during the surge that you became sick? How do you feel that you were affected by, COVID, in your life and things like that? So I'll ask like little questions like that, because it seems like I get more information then too, because then they start talking a little bit more and they ask me, usually a couple questions. So I just kind of like dig their brain a little bit. And then sometimes I have found out that, maybe they had poor access, to get vaccinated, or maybe they had a really hard time getting tested, or, sometimes they just tell me more things and then I just put it in the notes. And if it's important, I'll obviously pass it on. But it's just interesting. I always like to get like a few minute perspective from people, because everyone has dealt with it so differently.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. That definitely is a very open-ended question, and you get a lot of information. It even reminds me of this first elicit. So you get a lot of good information on that. So yes, and it sounds like that is part of the scope of your work. I know for many of us, for example, at Denver Health, who have done contact tracing and case investigation, I have 15 minutes for the call. I'm really trying to develop rapport and try to get a lot of good information, but also making sure if I'm a contact tracer to also ask about their contacts and talk about quarantine. So depending on the scope of your work, for sure, that sounds like a great question. You get a lot of good information. And I think, yes, those open-ended questions are super helpful in being able to get that. So thank you for that work and offering that as something that you can ask your clients. Thank you. And Andrew, I see you. So I see here that you wrote, I always bookend my calls with an offering for questions and concerns in a very general sense. So once verified before asking any personals, and then once we're done before thanking them and saying goodbye. Beautiful. Yes, for sure. Offering questions and concerns and being able to answer them the best that we can has been super important in the work that we've been doing for COVID. Yes, thank you. Beautiful. You all have the spirit of motivational interviewing and being able to help folks in an empathetic, compassionate, and client-centered way. Beautiful. Any other comments or questions? Well, good. We're going to have you practice, realizing that this might be new for some of you, but Erin's going to do her magic and place you in breakout rooms in pairs. So one person will start as the speaker. So you would use elicit, provide, elicit. So you could use some of those same questions of tell me what you know about COVID-19, or tell me what you know about isolation, tell me what you know about quarantine, tell me what you know about the resources in the area. You're going to practice your elicit, provide, elicit, and then you're going to switch roles. You can see here that Erin put those instructions in the chat. As you all know, probably the chat follows you into your breakout rooms. And Erin, I'm not sure the timing on this. My apologies.
Should we do about 6 minutes, so like 3 minutes each?
Sure, that sounds great. Okay, so 6 minutes, practice your elicit, provide, elicit, switch roles. And then if you have a little bit of time at the end, you could say what went well, what could be improved. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing here.
And I can give the time indicators to switch
Beautiful.
roles. So yeah, just going to be a quick little practice.
Okay, and please let us know if you have any technical issues. You're welcome to leave the breakout room, come back here. Otherwise, do-si-do, practice with your partner, elicit, provide, elicit, and we'll see you back here in about 6 minutes.
All right, you should see information inviting you to the breakout room.
Well done. Give yourself some snaps. Beautiful. I would love to just maybe hear from a couple groups. How was that for you? How was it practicing and using EPE with your partner? Would a couple folks be willing to share?
Hi, my name is Athena Mays. Can I come off of mute?
Yes, please. Thank you, Athena.
Okay, thank you. As I said, my name is Athena Mays. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I work with CDPHE, which is now converting to COIRP. I do CICT work, and I've been in there from the beginning. I had a great conversation, and some of the things that we both shared, in my opinion, is going into the interview or going into the call first being humble, explaining who we are, and explaining why we're gathering the information that we're gathering and how it is to help us as a state move forward through this pandemic and to become more familiar with everything through the data that we collect. And knowing that this is a voluntary interview, what I then do, because I have to verify per HIPAA law that I'm speaking to the correct person, and that can be difficult sometimes because, you know, we're asking them to verify personal information, but I've learned if I come into the call with humility, if I come into the call listening, and allowing that individual to express any concerns or issues they may have before I move forward, that then eases the conversation and then the interview process. So talking to my cohort, I kind of got the same thing from her. It's an amazing thing to be able to be somewhere else and be able to help someone who's somewhere else. And I think I'll end by saying this: when you have someone who's reaching out, that's not just showing concern, but it's also, they can feel that spiritually, that you care, that someone's checking on them, that someone is trying to offer the resources. That's, yeah, that was,
Yes.
and that's a great thing. And I'll end by saying too, you gain more information and clarity that way.
Beautiful.
And,
Thank you,
okay.
Athena. You have stated a lot of the components, the core concepts of motivational interviewing and really humanizing the work. So thank you for that. Yes, beautiful.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Of course, thank you. Would someone else be willing to share? How did ELICIT Provide ELICIT go for you? Maybe it was your first time, maybe you've used it before and it's old hat.
I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks for doing this class, Katie. It's really great to have new feedback and new ways to look at MI. So I popped into the conversation, and we were speaking about the ELICIT, and we came up with sort of just, it's like a conversation starter, and it just allows them to let their guard down, trust you, and they do share the information. You eventually will get the information, most likely by opening the conversation in a genuine way, in a concerned way. And like Athena May said, checking on people, they really like that, and they'll just really melt. Their hearts will melt when they feel that somebody is really being real with them and genuine, and it brings out, you know, kind of that you know, caring spirit that we all are in healthcare for. I love the healthcare field, and that's part of what I do it for, is I want to help. It's a little bit bigger than just a paycheck for me. It's a lot more than that, and I have an outlet for that instinct.
Beautiful. Thank you, Molly. It sounds like you and your partner really talked about empathy and compassion and humanizing the interaction. And yes, I think that first ELICIT really helps develop rapport, get a lot of good information, and kind of go from there. So well done, everyone. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for that. Whew, we got our first practice done. I know that's always, you know, a little bit of anxiety invoking for some of us. So thank you for that. And Athena and Molly, thank you for sharing that. I think you talked about a lot of these things that we started with after the OARS, where we're really going to talk about these processes and how we can do this somewhat quickly within our work, but really focusing on the client through the processes of engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. So we'll go through them a little bit more in depth. So that first engaging, like I said before, is really developing the rapport, the relational foundation. It doesn't have to take very long. You are inviting the person to be an active participant, keeping an open mind. Oftentimes within this, we're talking about our work, who we are, like Athena said, making sure that we are abiding by confidentiality and HIPAA, and really making sure that someone feels very safe in the conversation and maybe sharing some very private information. So that's the engaging. And it is an open relationship with our person that we're talking to, maybe even on the phone, and how we're able to do that very quickly. And there are some challenges to engaging. And so within this is the very first process. So we're really trying to hear from the client on the phone, let's say. So we're trying to avoid the writing reflex. Has anyone heard of what the writing reflex is? Does anyone know that? Maybe if you've taken some motivational interviewing training. Thank you for that comment, Athena. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your comment and appreciation for the course. Jean, thank you. Trying to fix everything. Andrew, thank you for being so open. This is my default setting, and it's a nightmare to stop it. So I wonder, Jean or Andrew, would either of you be willing to unmute and tell us what the writing reflex is? Okay, might be, and that's fine. I'll share.
I'm sorry.
Oh, please, yes.
There we go. I had both mute buttons on. I apologize.
Oh, no
I only
worries.
took one off.
Okay,
It's like,
thank you.
It's like you're not there to listen. You're there to just fix it. And you're not even really internalizing the problem. Someone just goes, oh, my foot hurts. And instead of going, oh, I'm so sorry, your foot hurts. That sucks. Do you know what happened? You're just like, oh, yeah, I know this amazing cream that will make your foot stop hurting right away. Let me get some for you. And they're just like, I just needed an ear. I don't want to fix it.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. So yes, and like you said, Molly, most of us are in healthcare because we want to make a difference. We want to help people. We're so solution focused. But you're right, we really want to just stop and listen, no fixing in this engaging, where really it's that very beginning of the conversation. So instead of me doing a data dump with the 20 things that I have to fix your foot, to fix your COVID, to fix your obesity, is just listening. So instead of trying to think of all the solutions for someone, is just really listening what's going on for them. And I'm not trying to fix it at this point. I'm just really trying to engage them and build that rapport and figure out what's going on. So thank you for that. So then the next phase of that is focusing. So really talking about what's going on for them, what would they like? You might be negotiating some things with someone. Again, it's two experts talking. And so the expertise in setting the goals is balanced. If we move to the plan too early, then we're going to lose someone. That might increase resistance. They're not going to feel heard. And so we're really trying to focus the conversation, what's going on for them. And then the next part of that is really evoking. So you could start then here thinking about what their motivation is, what's going on for them. And like one of my mentors said for motivational interviewing is stop talking and be curious. So again, that use of silence is a superpower. And I realize that can seem awkward on the phone, but people oftentimes need time to think about it. There's a lot of emotion behind COVID-19. And so really giving them time to evoke, figure out where the motivation is, really figuring out where it comes from. And Jean, I see your comment here. If fixing needs to occur, and it might be needed, MI would have us move to them setting goals to fix themselves and how. Beautiful, beautiful. So the client is in charge, the case, the contact, the patient is in charge. And so for them to be able to really focus on what they would like to do. So, and then the next that we'll see here is that spirit of evoking, that spirit of evocation. So again, a lot of times people know their own solutions. They may have thought of it, but maybe they're overwhelmed, or maybe they are so stressed about having to pay the rent, or so scared that they're going to get their elderly mother sick who's living with them. So within that, you could say something like, you have what you need and together we can find a solution. If they don't have a solution or they are not really sure what to do, this really helps with ambivalence. So we'll see that, quote, pro-change side is there. We just have to help move it forward, because ambivalence, which we'll talk about in just a second, we know that people see both sides of something. And so we're really trying to evoke that pro-change side. So what are they saying? What are they doing where we can really talk about the change and being healthier? So as you see here, ambivalence is a normal part of change. Oftentimes people see the good side of changing and the not good side of changing. I will say, when I was doing an intervention in our family planning clinic, and it was based on motivational interviewing, but it was really trying to reduce high-risk drinking and increase contraception, I would ask the women that I was counseling, what are the good things about your drinking alcohol? And they would look at me and they say, aren't you supposed to judge me? Why are you asking me about that? But there are good things to behaviors, even if we know they're not the healthiest for us. So many of them would say, it tastes good, all my friends drink, I'm more social, I'm a better dancer. And so there are good things about a behavior, even if we know it's not the healthiest for us. And then we would talk about the other side. What are the not so good things about your alcohol use? Well, I'm in the clinic again, and I don't love coming to the clinic. I got nervous the last time I had sex, or I really don't know what's going on with me. I don't even think about my drinking. And then the next thing I know, I'm not doing what I would really like to do as my ideal person. And so this is a normal part of change. Does anyone do a pro-con list? I'm old school. I do the write down your pros and cons of changing a behavior. And then I figure, gosh, I made my decision. One list is much larger than the other. So I will make this decision to change. And so it is a normal part. You may be ambivalent every day about a certain behavior. So a way that we can help with this is acknowledging those two sides and really focusing on the change talk. So as you can see here, this was from one of our motivational interviewing experts who is a gardener. If you look on the left side, those are red toe flax, or something called butter and eggs, which those of you who are gardeners would know that those are weeds. I didn't know that until I got trained on these slides, but those are weeds. So those often will hear people really giving the negative side of changing. I can't do that, it's too hard. I've tried before and it really didn't work well in the past. I'm exhausted. I can't think of doing anything regarding isolation. The flowers, or the daffodils, are the change talk. So when you hear some of those phrases, you can really latch on to them. Well, I really would like to protect my elderly mother. I'm worried about her health. Or, yeah, my young kid is not vaccinated yet, and I really want to make sure that he stays safe. Or, wow, what you brought up to me on this call is really making me think about how I can stay home and protect my coworkers by not going in, something like that. So within that, you will hear some of the change talk, and that's what you can really latch on to pick the flowers. So there is an acronym called DARN CAT. For those of you who learned MI quite a while ago, it used to just be the darn C. Now it's DARN CAT. So you'll see here the desire to make a change, the advantages of changing, reasons for change, the need, committing to change, and the ability. So that often is the ready and the willing to change and the taking steps. So for example, if I'm just thinking about some of the patients that I've worked with, someone might say something like, wow, I really do need to get vaccinated because I've been so worried going out in public with Omicron that I really would like to get vaccinated. Are there places where I can go? And then you would be able to help them with that. Or advantages of changing. Well, if I did isolate, then I know my mom would be more protected. So that is something that's important to me. Or you might hear something like the taking steps, where someone says, well, I did research, I know the clinic hours, I know when I can go in and get my vaccination. So you will hear the change talk within the folks that you're working with, and you really want to focus on that because that will really help you and help them make those small steps towards change. So I'd like to just pause here and see if there are any questions about change talk or the DARN CAT acronym and how you might be able to help folks when you hear some of these phrases in regards to desire or need or ability. Any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about the scaling or the rulers. I know several of you mentioned the scaling or the rulers when we talked about in your introductions on how to help people change. So I'm going to talk about this, and then I'd love to hear your experience on how you've used it in your work. But I'll talk about it first. So, and again, we use this in our clinic. We had a little laminated ruler, 1 through 10, that I showed folks. And I found that even if folks had been born in other countries with other metric systems or other measurement systems, they always understood the rulers because it's a very common way of measuring things, even if the measuring system was different. So the technique and the science behind it is starting with a question, and it is specific of how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that you could quarantine. 1 is not confident at all. 5 is somewhat confident that you could quarantine, or 10 is extremely confident that you could quarantine, like we talked about. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? And then someone will give a number. Let's say someone gives the number 5. Within that, you would go down 1 or 2 on the scale, only a couple because we don't want to go down too far or go up too far in a second. Why are you at a 5 and not a 4? And then you'll hear some of the reasons why the person is more confident. So, well, I'm at a 4 because I feel like I could do it. You know, I've had to stay home before when I had the flu, so I feel like I kind of know what to do. And we do have a separate living quarters in my mom's house, so I could do that. Okay, so how could you get to be a 6 in your confidence? So you go up 1 or 2, and then you'll hear some of the things that they might need. So, well, I feel like I'd be more confident in quarantining if do you have any literature or things that I could share with my family? I'm kind of nervous about what they might say to me, and they'll just tell me it's really not that important. So do you have some stuff that might help me, or could you help me talk through it? So that's how you would do the confidence scale. And then we also have an importance scale. And in our clinic, we also used readiness. Depending on your work, you may or may not use the readiness, but the confidence and the importance scales are the most common. So I would ask a very similar question. I'm going to change the focus, just pretend it's a different type of call. How important is it for you on a scale of 1 to 10 to isolate? You just got your results and you know that you have COVID-19. How important is it for you to isolate on a scale of 1 to 10? 1, not important at all. 5, somewhat important, and 10, extremely important to isolate. And let's say that elderly mother example again. So it's pretty high because she has some health conditions. I'm worried about her. She's in her 80s. So I would say it's an 8. It's pretty important. Okay, so it's an 8 on importance. And why an 8 and not a 7? Well, it's super important. She's 80. She's kind of frail. I don't want her to get COVID. Okay, so how could you get to be a 9? Whew, this is just new information. I know I got tested. I know it could be a possibility that I have COVID-19, but I really wasn't expecting this. How could I get it to be more important? Well, I don't know. Do you mind if we just talk more about COVID-19 and what the side effects are and what else I need to do to isolate? So then again, you go down 1 or 2 on the scale and you go up 1 or 2 on the scale. And you're going to find out what's important for them to be able to make the change, or do you have to help increase their confidence because they just need a little bit more skill, more information, how to figure out how to make it more of a priority. And so those are kind of a quick way and a very good visual to figure out where someone is on the scaling. And again, if you want to use readiness, how ready are you on a scale of 1 to 10 to be able to start quarantine? And you'll get a good indicator for that. Okay, so that's a lot. I'd first like to ask, who has used the scaling in your COVID work and how have you used it? I'd love to hear from a couple folks. How have you used the rulers in your COVID work? Would love to have some folks unmute. Okay, I see a chat coming in. Okay, Rebecca, thank you. I haven't tried it yet, but I would like to. Thank you for that. Has anyone used it at all? We'd love to hear your practical experience for the group. Okay, so it sounds like we have some folks who haven't used it before, and that's fine. I'll maybe, we have one more role play. I'll maybe challenge you to try to use it because I do love the scales. It's a really easy way to get to know where someone is. And so we have used it quite a bit within our work because it is a very quick way to figure out where someone is on the scale. So if it's extremely important for someone, let's say, for example, that one that I just used with my elderly mother, where it's super important to me to isolate, but I'm not very confident on how to isolate. Let's say I was at an 8 for importance, but at confidence, I'm at a 2. And let's just say, hypothetically, we live in a very small space. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to tell her and my partner that I have COVID-19. And so as your role, let's say as a case investigator, you might be helping me talk about what isolation is. Do you have it within your scope of work that you could have a call with the mother and the partner? Could you send them information? Could you role play with me on how I might bring that up to my mom? And maybe within that role play, maybe there's some refinement. Okay, Katie, that worked really well to tell your mom about this, but let's talk a little bit more about the timeframes for isolation. Let's talk about what that really means in your small space. So if someone is not so confident, a lot of times we might be doing that role play, we might be doing that practice, we might be having to give a little bit of information and then asking how they feel about it and how I might be able to isolate. Okay, Jean, I see you here. Use it when someone has to isolate in home with many people. Great, thank you. You're right. So that's something that I was thinking of might be really important to go through with someone to make sure that they have the skills that they need in order to be able to talk to their family in their small setting in order to be able to really isolate within that parameter. Okay. So I'd also love to know, what questions do you have about evoking the change talk and scaling? Again, we're talking about confidence, we're talking about importance, you might even be talking about readiness. What questions do you have about the scaling? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any. Please let me know if you have any at all. Would love to hear them, because again, elicit, provide, elicit, OARS, the scaling, these are all really good tools to use, even if you just have a very short time frame for your COVID-19 interactions, your calls. These actually work really well, and they can work pretty quickly too. Okay, so of course, with the change talk, we have to make sure that we notice it. And so some of the questions that you could use if you're talking to someone is, tell me about a time when you weren't feeling well and you didn't go to work. Or in what ways are things better than what they were last week? So again, you're going to really be hearing that darn cat. You're going to be hearing their desire to change, the advantages. You're going to hear about how they've been starting to take steps or how they've really been ready to do something, and you're going to notice it. And again, that reflection, putting up a mirror, and if you can, try to get at some of the emotion and feeling behind it. Again, reflections, listening, and silence. Those are really good tools for motivational interviewing. And those will really help you in your conversations, especially when there's a lot of emotion behind what's going on. And I feel like in the work, at least for me, a lot of the fear has reduced. When I think about when we first started a couple years ago before vaccinations, wow, the amount of emotion that would come up in the interactions. And a lot of it, I think, was fear, is that people were really afraid about the side effects, about COVID, about exposing others, about being exposed. I think those interactions a couple years ago have not been as hard somewhat recently because of vaccination and people maybe getting more used to things and how things have been working recently, but really being able to listen and reflect have been super important. Then when they are ready, again, when they're ready for that, you can start with the planning. And I love this question. We call it the what next question. So what's next? And you could stop there. It's a very open question, and someone may start responding with that. Or if it takes them a little bit more prompting, you could say, where would you like to go from here? What are next steps that you would like to take? You could start with that. You don't have to provide all the answers. Again, you don't have to write all of the wrongs, right? So try to avoid that writing reflex and balance that with some expertise, some of the answers that you have, and really getting at some of those answers and some of the solutions that your client comes up with will be super helpful. I wonder if anyone has a suggestion or some examples of what you used in your work when a client, a case, a contact was really able to come up with their own solutions. Would anyone be willing to share one of their shining moments where the client was able to come up with their own solution and make some steps forward? Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any. Maybe we'll get some of those answers when we come back from our last role play, our last practice session. So I know Erin, I love that she shared these with you. We have developed a conversation flow. She's going to put that in chat. I know you all got that in email. That's such a great resource. When I actually had a desk in the office, I had that up at my office because it's so good. It talks about engaging, the focus, the evoking, the planning. That really is a good guide for motivational interviewing and how we can interact with our clients, our patients, our cases, and our contacts. So you can use that. And she also is putting in that MI cheat sheet. Again, I love that resource too. It talks about some of the processes that we talked about, the OARS, the darn cat. You'll see that little diagram of the advantages and disadvantages of the behavior change. Again, a lot of behavioral theory talks about that, the pros and cons, the cost benefit of changing. And something we didn't talk about because this is such a quick taste of motivational interviewing, something else that's important to behavior change is called stages of change. So there's a little graphic about what that is and how you can help a client change based on what stage they're in. And again, we can talk about that after this training if you have questions and want to use that within your work. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a role play, a skills practice with a partner. Again, it should be the same partner. So we're going to have about 20 minutes and you're going to maybe talk about the work that you do so that your partner can really role play a typical quote client that you work with. You may have to make up some details, but the first person to start will be using that conversation worksheet or the MI cheat sheet. You're going to try to use a couple MI skills for about 8 minutes. If there's something that you'd really like to try, for example, the scaling, it sounds like that's new for a lot of folks, maybe decide to use the rulers within that very short 8-minute interaction. But try to use a couple of the motivational interviewing skills with your client. Role play for about 8 minutes. Erin will give you a time indicator and then debrief for about 2 minutes. What went well, what could be improved. And then the second person will role play as the case investigator, contact tracer, resource coordinator, nurse. And the other person will be the client. So again, depending on your work, tell your client what their role is. I will ask the clients not to win any Academy Awards. Please no overacting so that you're worker can actually practice some of the motivational interviewing skills. The second person will practice for about 8 minutes. Try to use that conversation flow worksheet, the cheat sheet, maybe try out a skill or two, and then 2 minutes of debrief. We'll come back to the larger room and we'll talk about it a little bit, answer some questions, and wrap up for the day. So what questions do you have about what you're going to be doing for the next 20 minutes? And I see Erin put in the instructions there in the chat, which again, that will follow you. The cheat sheet and the conversation flow will follow you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So show yourselves a little bit of grace, a little bit of patience, and have fun. We'll see you back here in 20 minutes. If you have any tech issues, you're welcome to come back to the larger room and Erin can help you with that. Otherwise, we'll see you back here after your practice. Erin's going to do her magic.